Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel Style by C. So returning subscribers, you guys are so amazing. If it is your first time of stopping by, thank you. Do subscribe to the channel, share to friends, turn on your notification bell. Today's tutorial will be on how to make this beautiful 6 pieces gown. The drafting parts. We'll be having another part on how to sew the gown. Okay, so stay tuned for more and more. This is the fabric we'll be working with. These African prints. I have 2 yards of each, so that's what we're going to be working with for this beautiful tutorial, this amazing gown. So stay tuned. To draft out my basic body first. All right, so I'm going to be using this as my start line. So this is my start line, which is also going to be serving as my shoulder line. You insert your shoulder measurement there. From that point your shoulder stops, you come down by 1 inch. All right, then 3 inches for your neck width. Go ahead and create your shoulder slope. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be marking my armhole measurements. All right, you can decide to divide your armhole by 6 plus half an inch, or better still, use your shoulder measurements. Whatever you have as a shoulder measurement, insert it back here. So this is what I have, 7.5 inches. All right, now the next thing I'm going to be marking is my shoulder measurements again at this point. So I'm going to be making a rule across. This is going to serve as my chest line. Then I'm going to divide my armhole measurements into 2 to get the center of it. Then from that point, I'm going to be coming in by half an inch. This is to enable me create my armhole curve. So connect your shoulder slope to this point, then curve it into your armhole. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to be placing my tape back to my start point line. I'll mark my chest line. Okay, this is my chest line already. I'll go ahead and mark my bust point, which is 10 inches, my under bust, which is 13 inches, my waistline, which is at 16 inches, my hip measurement or hip line, which is at 24 inches. All right, so having done these points, the next thing I'm going to do is to make a rule, a horizontal rule across each point. So this is what I have. Now I'm going to go ahead and indicate which line stands for which. So this is C, chest line or CL, BP, bust points, this UB, under bust cut, this is my waist, this is hip, and the next thing is the full length of my gown. All right, it depends on how long you want your gown to be. And the last point is the hemline, which is H. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead and divide my nipple to nipple measurements, or we call it bust span measurements. All right, so I have 8 inches. When I divide it, I'm going to be having 4. That is going to be serving as my dart line. So I'm going to mark 4 inches from the center point of my paper. I'll mark 4 inches from. I'm going to be marking 4 inches. I'm making a point first. So this is going to be starting from my bust point down to the hem of my gown. All right, so this is what I have. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going so guys, now the next thing I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be marking 1 inches away from my that intake, that is from this center area. Now the center part of my gown, I'm going to be marking 1 inches. Then from this side part of my gown, I'm going to be marking 1.5 inches. This is going to start from my under bust, all right, down to the hem of my gown. So I've already marked my 1 inches. The next thing I'm going to do now is just to connect the points together. Please, starting or kicking off from my under bust to the hem of the gown. All right. Okay, so this is what we have. The next thing I'm going to be doing now is I'm going to be connecting this my dart intake I've marked here to my bust line using my curve drill. So I've connected the 2 points together this way. So this is what I have now. Now the next thing we're going to be determining is how, like, because this is an off shoulder gown, you're going to be creating a new chest line. So from your start point or your shoulder line, you're going to be marking where you want your new chest line to be. You can decide to work with 6, 6, 7, 5. It depends on how deep you want yours to be. So, or how off you want yours to be. I'm going to be working with 5 inches. All right. Now, I'm going to be connecting this my line, the first that line I marked, to that 5 inches. So this is what I have. Then I'm going to be making a V on top there. Alright, so this is what I have. Now the next thing I'm going to be making is on this line, I'm going to be marking 1 inch for my dart intake. Okay, so this is my 1 inches. Having done this, I will now go ahead and connect it to my bust points. So this is what we have now. All right, so now the next thing we're going to be doing now is we're going to be determining how deep you want your sweetheart to be. All right, so you can decide to keep it at your chest line. You can decide to come in by half an inch below your chest line. The choice is totally yours. Okay, so for mine, I want it to be at my chest line or maybe half an inch below my chest line. Now I'm going to be curving it in. Okay, I think the chest line is perfect. It's fine for me. All right, so then for this other side, I'm going to be blending it into the armhole. So from this point, you can really blend it into your armhole. All right. So this is what we have. All right, so now the next thing we are going to be doing now is we're going to be inserting our body measurements, like our round body measurements. So for my bust, my bust is 34. When I divide it, I have 8.5. I'm going to mark my 8.5. Then coming to my waist, I have 7 inches. I'll go ahead and mark it. My under bust, I have 7.25. Okay, I went ahead and marked it. The same thing I did for my hip measurement. My hip measurement is 36. When I divide it, I have 9. So having done this now, the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is to insert my seam allowance. Then this part we took out 1 inch from this side, 1.5 inch from this side, we're going to still add it back to our pattern paper. Okay, so let's take for instance now at the waistline we took out 2.5 inches. Okay, so please kindly go ahead and add it back to your pattern paper. So this is not the actual seam allowance, this is the allowance we took out from our pattern paper. All right, so that is what we are going to, that is what we are adding back to our paper, mind you. All right, so having done this now, we are going to be adding our seam allowance, like actual body seam allowance or the seam allowance you are working with. So I'm working with 2 inches seam allowance. You can decide to work with, 1 inch seam allowance, which is totally fine and okay. Then for this point now, I'm going to be adding these 2 inches I took out from here. All right, these 2 inches here, and also added my actual seam allowance. Now go ahead and connect your points together. So this is what we have for our front. Okay, so now for this upper part, you can just state that this is the yoke. That is, if you are working with a yoke, maybe you go ahead and give it a neckline, maybe 3 inches or 3.5 or 4 inches deep. All right, so this is the yoke, but we're not working with the yoke. What we're working is with this down part. All right, so now we're going to cut this off. So at this point now, I'm cutting it out. So this is what we are left with. I'm also going to go ahead and label my pattern, which is side F, side front, and center front CF. After which I'll go ahead and cut it off. So this is what I have for my front. Now we are going to go ahead and cut out for our back piece. Okay guys, okay, when we are done with the front piece, the next thing we're working on is our back pattern paper. All right, so now I'm going to be, okay, I've already drafted out the piece. This is my chest line, this is my waistline, this point is my hip, and the next point is my hemline. All right, now this allowance I left here, I left 1.5 inches. This is for my zip allowance. Okay, so now the next thing I'm going to be marking now is my nipple to nipple or my bust span measurement. divide by 2. I'm going to go ahead and mark it from the center of my piece, okay, after the zip allowance. So I'm going to be marking it all the way to the hem of my gown. So during marking the dots, the next thing I did was to connect it using a straight rule. Okay, so this is what I have. Now the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to be marking half an inch on both sides of my waistline. This is for my dart intake. So come to my waistline, I'm going to mark half an inch, half an inch. All right, now the next thing is 1 inch below my chest line. That is where my dart intake is going to stop, because this is our back pattern. Then from this part now, 2 inches before my hip line. Okay, so this is what I have. Now I'm going to be connecting my half an inch to this point I have here. Just watch what I'm doing. All right, and I also do the same for this part. So this is what I have for my dart intake. Now the next thing I'm going to go ahead and do is to insert my round body measurements. So as usual on what we have, after which I went ahead to insert my seam allowance. So at the waistline, I'm going to be adding this 1 inch I took off from here. All right, I'm adding it back to my pattern paper. Then the next thing I did was to connect my points together. At this point now, I'm transferring my pattern paper to my fabric. Alright, so see you in the next video on the sewing tutorial. Thank you. So this is what I have for my back piece. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this out.